Well, got me there. Say, what's a hand grenade? None of my sources say what happened to the dog after his untimely nubbening, but I do know Dan never got sued, so I guess the operation was a success. Daniel's sister passed away in 1766, leaving him so distraught that he actually went out of his way to buy mourning clothes for her funeral. And by that I mean he bought a pair of secondhand black stockings, and that's it. Still, that's a big deal when it comes to the likes of Dancer. At this point, the only person close to a friend that Dancer had was a woman known as Lady Tempest. She was so influential over him that she was actually able to convince him to buy, get this, a 1 shilling hat. This was quite an accomplishment, as Daniel's last hat was older than half of you at 14 years old.
What? I'm not. You don't.
Meow.
You.
Of course, the next time Lady Tempest went to hang out with him, he was still wearing his old disgusting hat. When questioned about the one he bought, he goes, "Oh yeah, that frilly old thing. Sold it for a 6p profit. Super easy too. I tell you, forget house flipping. Hat flipping is going to be the cool new thing pretty soon." Lo and behold, 250 years later, he was wrong.
Next we have the APGAR score. So the APGAR score is a rating system used by hospitals to determine how healthy a newborn baby is on a scale from 0 to 10. It's called APGAR based on its 5 criteria, which include appearance, pulse, grimace, activity, and respiration. And each of these is rated on a scale from 0 to 2 to get your final score. Personally, I think this set of standards is a little flawed. Here's an example. Well, it's completely blue, and it doesn't really want to move at all, but it's got a really fast heartbeat, and it's screaming really loudly. I'd give this baby like a 6 out of 10. That's good enough.
These were in vogue for a while before falling out of style a bit of the way into the 20th century, because apparently society started deeming babies more valuable than air conditioners. I don't really get it personally, but this is also around the time we started putting lead in gasoline, so it's probably for the best we kept them inside all day. Matter of fact, it's my firm belief that without kids growing up breathing lead, there's no way pet rocks would have taken off in the 70s. Then one day, in 1944, the country of Guatemala had a democratic revolution, and the newly elected leader, Juan Jose Arevalo, wasn't happy with how the companies treated his people. So he implemented several reforms, like a minimum wage law and universal suffrage. And while the populace got a lot of benefit out of this, United Fruit most certainly did not, because more rights for their workers means less profits for the business as a whole. Then Guatemala got a new president, Jacobo Arbenz, and he continued these reforms. And United continued to get the metaphorical shaft until finally, in 1953, they decided to go to the USA for help. Oh, Eisenhower. Yo, what's up? This Jacobo guy, he's making us pay minimum wages. Well, that doesn't sound very good for business. That's not all, though. He's also taking our unused land and giving it back to the people. Does that sound familiar? Oh dear. You don't think. By the way it's looking, Dwight, I'd say he's a dirty, oh god, collectivizing, no, commie. Commie! Commie! Yeah, go get him, Dwight. Holy shit, you actually did it. World Star! How do you define a human in the simplest of terms possible? Plato decided to tackle this question, and he came up with featherless biped. And in the ancient Greek world, they didn't have any kangaroos or gibbons or nothing, so people were the only things around that both walked on 2 legs and didn't have feathers. Plato thought he was real clever with that one. Diogenes, on the other hand, he wasn't having any of it. So he said, "Alright, you pompous prick, I'll give you a featherless biped." So, in reality, we do not learn, and what we call learning is only a process of recollection. Oh god damn it, not you again. What's up, fuckers? Hey, check out this person I found. Isn't it such a human? Look at him, wow. What a guy. Anyway, love to stay and chat, but I saw some trash outside that looked delicious. Smell you later, deliberator. Yes, my student. Yeah, what the fuck? Our next tale revolves around Greg Rasmussen, a British-born animal conservationist who was studying wildlife in Zimbabwe. One day, he got reports of a highly endangered rhino being spotted in the area, so Greg took to the skies in a single-passenger plane to track the beast. Fate was looking down at Greg that day, and after a moment, it said, "No, rhino must die." And a huge gust of wind came out of nowhere, sending Greg into a tailspin, crash landing right in the middle of the untamed African bush. When Greg woke up, he found that his legs looked like used up tubes of toothpaste, so he was essentially trapped right where he was. Arguably worse than that was the fact that Greg was dehydrated before he even took off, hoping to get water at his destination. And just when things looked like they couldn't get any worse, they got worse. A group of elephants showed up and started harassing and straight up stampeding at Greg. With no other option, he starts banging on the wreckage as hard as he could. good. The elephants went, "Ha!" and decided to leave him alone. He was also approached by a pack of hyenas and actual lionesses on the hunt. But fortunately, animals are all morons, so the same trick worked on them too. Greg spent an entire day and night pinned under the wreckage, fighting off wildlife, severe dehydration, and extreme temperatures before finally being rescued the next morning. Incredibly, after over 100 operations, doctors managed to get Greggy's leggies up and running again. Although he was now 3 inches shorter, which is probably for the best, because now they can just stick the keys to the plane on top of the fridge so he never has another incident like this again. And that would have been the end of it. But I guess Shiva Gautama Christ-chan, the one true god, decided Gage still had unfinished business down here on Shit Outta Luck 3, because after a few minutes of twitching on the ground, he got up, looked around, and thought, well, now's a good time as any for my yearly checkup. According to the doctor he went to, while Gage was retelling the story of what happened, he suddenly started vomiting all over the place, the effort of which, and I quote, pushed out about half a teacup full of the brain, which fell upon the floor. He didn't say what they did with it after. I'm picturing his dog just running over and immediately scarfing it down, then being plagued with the memories of a human railroad worker for the rest of his life. In the months following, Gage made a near complete recovery, physically anyway. He did lose a bit of his mind, which caused him to lose his mind a bit. Whereas Gage was once an upstanding, hardworking citizen, his untimely brain blast transformed him into an angry, incoherent drunkard, mumbling, quote, the grossest profanity whenever he deemed fit, and showing little to no regard for human life whatsoever. Naturally, he was fired from his job at the railroad, so Gage ended up wandering the earth, earning money any way he could. For a while, he hung out at Barnum's American Museum in New York City, basically making an exhibit of himself, standing there with a tamping iron like, "Hi, this went through my brain. Bye!" He later had a stint as a farmhand in California and a stagecoach driver in Chile, which I don't know who let the guy with severe brain trauma and no depth perception drive a vehicle, but whatever. Over time, he actually became a lot more functional until finally, 10 years later, when his brain remembered, oh yeah, I shouldn't exist, leading to Gage having a bunch of seizures and dying at age 36. Okay, well anyway, guess what? Your tab now has unlimited credit. Oh, cool. Well, what's that mean? It means you can drink as much as you want and we can't stop you. Bet. Naturally, he orders shot after shot and the gang happily complies. It gets to the point where Malloy's drinking way more than should be humanly possible, but instead of dropping dead or passing out, after a while he's just like, hi. See ya. Within 24 hours, he's back at it, giving his liver the equivalent of a Tyson uppercut and being no worse for wear. This went on for a few days before the boys were like, alright, we need to up the ante here, and decided to replace Malloy's typical shots with wood alcohol, otherwise known as methanol. Keep in mind, as little as 4% methanol by volume is enough to make a moonshiner go blind, and just 2 shots of the pure stuff should be able to kill a man. But Malloy slammed back just as much as he normally would, totally none the wiser, and was like, still see ya. Anyway, see ya. They tried again for a few more nights, he was fine. Soaked some expired oysters in wood alcohol and fed them to him, he was fine. They gave him a sandwich made from rotten sardines and carpet tacks. Motherfucker asks for another. Don't you have like a wife and 2 kids? Destiny. Hoyos was soon diagnosed with tuberculosis, which was considered fatal at the time, so naturally Carl decided to handle her treatment, going as far as convincing her family to let him visit their home every day. Except he was a radiologist, so even if there were reliable means to treat tuberculosis at the time, he definitely didn't have the credentials to do so, but whatever. This is the past we're talking about after all. That place was a shit show from start to finish. I'm not about to get on somebody's case for a little clerical error. In addition to whatever salves and tinctures and such doctors gave to people back then, Tansler showered her with gifts of clothes and jewelry. I know he meant well, but if I was bedridden with a terminal illness, I'd just be insulted. Like, wow, thanks, can't wait to show off this little number out on the town. Anyway, eventually, Tansler found that the time had come to reveal his true feelings. Elena, there's something I must confess. I'm deeply in love with you. I'm so glad you feel the same. Hoyos inevitably succumbed to the disease, leaving Tansler heartbroken. He just wasn't ready to part ways with his pestilence-riddled sweetheart, so he asked the family's permission to commission an above-ground mausoleum for their daughter. And since this was the early 20th century, they said, what a sweet, selfless man. I'm sure he'd never do this just so he could commit crimes against nature. Then he was like, oh yeah, by the way, could I have some of her hair too? Sure, kind stranger. Here's a bag of her hair we just had lying around for some fucking reason. Again, no red flags here. He went to visit her dwelling nearly every night for 2 years. Then finally one day he said, you know what, kid? You're alright. Say, how's about we ditch this musty old mausoleum and go back to my place? I'll take that as a yes. Stay above the influence. At some point in his journey, he ended up getting coated in wax and paint to look a little less rotty, before ending up in a warehouse in 1949. Here's the thing, he was in there alongside some actual wax figures, and after spending 19 years in storage, nobody knew he was a real corpse anymore, so he ended up getting sold in 1968 as a mannequin to one Spoonie Singh, owner of the Hollywood Wax Museum. He tried to lend the guy out a couple times during his stay, but people found him too gross or unrealistic looking for whatever purposes they had in mind, so he ended up getting sold again and used as a prop of a hanged man at the Pike Amusement Zone in their Funhouse ride, with zero knowledge that he was an actual dead criminal. It wasn't until 1976, 65 years after his death, that an episode of The $6 Million Man was being filmed at the complex, and a stagehand tried to move the prop around only to have its arm break off in his hand. He was like, ugh, lousy stiff. Wait a minute, that's curious. This mannequin's got human flesh and bones inside of it. Wait a minute. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Well, it went something like this. Alright, honeybee. Zzz, ow, God, that hurt. I'll give that like a 2. Next, paper wasp. Zzz, ah! Okay, that's like a 3. Next, let's try bullet ant. Jesus Christ, Mary Mother of Satan's left nipple, it's like my hand is made entirely out of urethras, and each and every one is having a red-hot catheter put in and ripped out 5 times every second. My very being is on fire. My only desire left is for death himself to bless me with sweet relief. I'll give that a 4. No. 4+. So as you can see, a lot of the man's exploits are pretty ludicrous. Apparently though, Freud's been doing some pretty crazy stuff even before he became a neurologist. When he was at university at age 19, Freud was tasked with finding the testicles of the eel. How hard could that be, Freud thought. Okay, Sigmund, here's 400 eels. Now just take your time and search carefully. These are all girls! Sir, I highly doubt that. Go get more! Mr. Freud, I really don't... What's a nigga gotta do to get some eel dick? As it turns out, male eels don't actually grow their testes until mating season, which is why Freud was unable to find them. So you may wonder what influenced Freud's behavior over the years. One explanation is the fact that the man loved cocaine.
Another fun creation myth is how the moon and sun came to be. So long ago, there were these 2 siblings named Melina and Aningen. The 2 got along just fine as kids, but as the 2 got older, they were put into their respective genders' living areas and saw each other less and less. Then one day, Aningen got the feeling that his lower nose was in dire need of some Eskimo kisses. So that night, he snuck into the women's lodges, saw his sister, thought, I pick that one, and proceeded to do, unspeakable things, technically becoming his own Eskimo brother. But it was too dark at the time for Melina to tell what happened. The next night, Aningen's like,
I'll fucking do it again.
okay. Only this time, Melina smears soot all over his face. So later, she goes over to the men's lodges, and who has crap all over his face but her brother? This makes her so mad that she cuts off her own breasts with a knife, puts them in a bowl, throws them at Aningen, and says, if you enjoy me so much, then here, eat 'em. Go ahead, eat my disembodied, quivering titties. She runs off into the night with a torch, and Aningen is really remorseful or horny or something, so he chases after her with his own torch, and they end up running so fast that they took off like a plane into the sky, and Melina became the sun while Aningen became the moon. Excuse me, Mrs. Elder, if the sun and moon didn't exist yet, how did he do that stuff at night when there was no night? Now, some details of the story are tied into real-world phenomena. Some say that Aningen tripped and messed up his torch, which is why the moon is so dim. And the moon cycles are because he gets really skinny from chasing after her for so long. And the new moon is when he goes away for a few days to hunt seals so he can fatten back up. But here's the kicker. Nobody ever explains what the whole lopping off her tits part was supposed to represent. That's entirely just creative liberty. Just like, yes, that's why the sun doesn't have tits.
Moving on. Cut to the year 1792. This marks the beginning of the War of the First Coalition. Ever heard of it? Me neither. Who was in it? Fucking everyone. Anyway, Terrare decided to enlist in the war. After all, maybe that profound emptiness he was feeling was just a lack of purpose in life. Turns out, no, he really was just psychotically hungry. Even after being granted quadruple rations, Terrare would still be digging through the trash pile whenever he got the chance. After suffering extreme exhaustion, he was sent off to the military hospital in Suzerain. The staff there was so dumbfounded by the man's abilities that they decided to keep him there to run a few experiments. The first of which involved putting Terrare in a room with a meal prepared for 15 people. Naturally, he ate the entire thing and immediately fell asleep. Next, they presented him with a raw eel. In response, Terrare crushed the eel's skull between his teeth before slurping down the entire creature in one go. Now, this is hair-clenchingly horrifying for a couple of reasons. Firstly, he put a whole frickin' eel in his stomach, but secondly, there had to be some point during digestion where the meat was gone but the bones still remained. Now, for those of you who don't know, an eel skeleton looks like this. That means Terrari had all of those needle-sized ribs stabbing into the walls of his stomach at once, and he was fine. He also ripped a live cat apart with his bare hands, drank its blood, and ate everything but its bones, and then later gagged up the fur and skin like an owl, but, you know, that's neither here nor there.